Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzer,
Mysa.
and this week we're going to be enthusiastically spotlighting a few great yet quite obscure sitcoms that remain underseen. All of these are fairly recent. They've all aired in the 21st century, so within the last 20 years or so. Like we're not talking about
Mhm.
Cheers or anything like that, but we'll be discussing Comedy Central's Detroiters and the other two from the little cable network, alongside something from the mid noughts in STARZ's Party Down, who you might recognize a lot of its cast from. In fact, it was created right after Veronica Mars was cancelled, and most of
Ah.
its cast and crew and writers and directors were working on Party Down. And finally, we'll talk about the most recent one, which is 2019's HBO Mexican supernatural comedy, Los Espookys. Um, the first thing that if you've ever seen any of these shows, or if you've never seen any of these shows, you kind of know that my taste in comedy isn't, shall we say, broad. It isn't like a Friends, like
Yeah.
a setup punchline kind of thing.
Mhm.
All of these four have like very different brands of humor. And they're all, very left field or bizarre or like gloriously dumb and loud like Detroiters are,
Yeah.
or quite on the pulse of today like the other two is. Party Down is pretty much in the vein of Ricky Gervais show.
Mhm.
It has a lot of strains of The Office and extras there. Lesser Spookies is probably the most bizarre of them all, with the weirdest sense of humor. So they all are, shall we say, not accessible comedies, but I kind of want to break down why I love these obscure comedies
Yeah.
and why their eccentric brands of humor appeal to me just because they're so different from your run of the mill sitcoms that appear on NBC, ABC, and your friends of that and stuff of the ilk, right?
Mhm.
Isa, I think, has only just recently caught four of these shows.
Yep.
Among the four of them, which would be your favorite?
Uh, I I think Party Down's got to be favorite for me.
Cool.
For sure. The other two I haven't quite finished both seasons yet. I'm only
Mm-hmm.
halfway through the first season, so I do appreciate its very present pop culture sensibilities. And
Yeah.
ability to laugh at itself in a very kind of modern, relatable way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Party Down is it for me. Lost as Bookies is funny, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so absurd. Sometimes it loses me, right? Like how far
Yeah.
they kind of take it.
Mm-hmm.
That and like a bit of the language barrier. I think like what I was watching, sometimes the subtitles seemed a bit off.
Yeah.
Um, for that, Detroiters was fun.
Yep.
For like the majority of like the first season and the first half of the first season, I got a bit bored
Mm-hmm.
after a while. I think like certain subjects that they focus on kind of like switched it up a bit, and sometimes it hit for me, sometimes it didn't. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, Party Down I thought was consistently funny, and I think like with the guest stars coming in, that kind of like added to just the general um comedy that we had over there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. For me, I think probably recency bias because the second season of the other two just aired like a couple of months ago.
Uh-huh.
So it's currently at the top for me, lah, but like I said, like it's probably recency bias, lah.
Yep.
But we will be beginning with one of the two Comedy Central shows in Detroiters, primarily because we have covered uh one of the shows that these two creators have already done.
Yes.
You can listen to our episode about I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson
Yeah.
last year one of the earliest episodes of Beholds actually. It was one of those most bizarre, left field, and eccentric sketch comedy shows I think that has ever existed. Its second season continues to be impressively bizarre. Have you seen season two, by the way, of I Think You Should
Oh
Leave?
no, I have not.
There is this gag with coffins that I don't even know how to describe. It's
Okay.
a it, it it's about like making sturdy coffins so that people don't flop through coffins. Apparently, in that world, that is a big problem. When the pallbearers are carrying the coffins, and then bodies would just flop through.
Oh God.
So apparently, it's a big problem. So
Yeah.
that's what the sketch is about. It's so weird, right? Like, and they make stuff like that work, and I think that is similar to their previous show, Detroitus. Created by Sam Richardson, who you may know from Veep,
Hmm.
as well as Tim Robinson. It was a scrappy little Comedy Central sitcom, back in 2017. Um, it follows. Man, how do I break this? Okay, it follows Sam Duvet,
Yeah.
Sam, who's played by Sam Richardson, of course, and Tim Kremlin, who is played by Tim Robinson, who are best friends who live in Detroit.
Yeah.
They love their city and they love each other fiercely. They live next door to each other. Tim is married to Sam's sister, and they run a low rent ad agency together where they produce low budget television commercials for local Detroit clients.
Hmm.
Ads, stuffed with cheese ball gags that they somehow manage to convince themselves are clever and witty.
Yeah.
And I should probably have like led with this. These two people are very very dumb. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
if that proved to be like the full extent of the series' like premise, local commercials are cheesy and the people who make them are idiots. Detroiters, first season might have made a bigger splash than it did, but instead of like acid wit, the show is kind of leavened with a sincere, um, profoundly goofy kind of sweetness.
Yeah.
Sam and Tim are not smart, and nor are they particularly good at what they do, but their affection for the city that they live in is very very real, and their status as best friends is inviolate. The chemistry between the two actors that portray them is incredible. Like, Richardson Sam is a man so convinced that he possesses skills that he very much does not, that the smallest compliment turns him into a creature of like hilarious smarm. And Robinson's Tim is what's the word, a mouth breather, who
Oh God. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
feels
That's spot on.
everything deeply and too deeply. And one of the Detroiters chief joys is watching that actor launched Tim from like slack jawed, uncomprehending passivity into like vein popping red rage and like back again in seconds.
Yeah.
And along the way, the guest cast is sprinkled with a lot of real world Detroiters like Keegan Michael Key and Mark Evan Jackson, along with just a lot of plainly funny people like former SNLers and current Ted Lasso Jason Sudeikis, Tim Meadows, Nora Dunn, Bobby Moynihan. The
Hmm.
humor is broad and dumb at times and casually filthy, but it's so often the little things like the tiny dialogue exchanges at the very end of a given scene that have the feel of improvisation, even if they really aren't, and
Yeah.
that produces the biggest laughs. There is a breeziness to the proceedings that keeps the series like reality flexible enough
Hmm.
to incorporate some pretty big plot swings without breaking stride. And it's really very good, very funny television for people who want to see a really dumbed down version of Mad Men, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on you've seen both seasons, right?
Yeah. I've seen both seasons.
Yeah.
I preferred season one more than season two, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a large part of it had to do with the moments that Tim goes off the hinge.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that was a bit more well spaced out in season one. Like we don't get to see that much until like the second half of season one, right?
Yeah.
In season two, it was funny at points. Uh, and then I think in particular after the episode where Tim's brother moves in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that episode kind of like turned me off a little for that particular kind of gag.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I don't really like the idea of sitting through a good third of the episode where people are just screaming at their top of their lungs at each other.
Yeah.
That to me isn't the kind of comedy I'm looking for necessarily. And to be fair, and to be clear as well, right? Like that's not the majority of what Detroiters is, but that particular episode in particular was just a bit of a turn off.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the moments that they weren't screaming at each other were plenty funny, right? Like it just tipped it over the scale for me. And from then on to the rest of it, every time Tim had a kind of breakdown, it did annoy me, I have to say.
Mhm.
But outside of that, I do feel like Sam and Tim's relationship, their chemistry, is entirely, oh man, it is so good and it is so funny in so many ways, right? That when either one of them is missing from a particular scene, it's very palpable. I do think like eventually when they get to the point where Sam goes back to his dad's restaurant, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, like Tim's loneliness and the emptiness in the office was something that I you could totally see, right? Like it was clear that there wasn't a presence there, that he was struggling to relate to other people. He was trying to keep the business afloat and all of that. And I think that is just a summation of that. It is an incredibly funny and codependent and
Mhm.
in often cases very toxic relationship between the two,
Yep.
where essentially one can't live without the other, quite literally. Uh, and all the situations in which that plays out in a very oddly specific industry portion of an industry, I
Mhm.
think. I most enjoyed them making commercials. Them pitching for commercials and making commercials and seeing like kind of like the output of that was some of my favorite gags. For sure. I love Chump of the Week and Maud Crim. That episode was hilarious.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, like some of my favorite kind of parts on that. All in all, like I enjoyed it. I do find like um yeah, some parts were just uneven because of an over reliance on Tim Robinson's very tried and true kind of like outburst, right? Which is something that we do see a fair bit more in his own show.
Mhm.
But it feels different when it's in his own show, right? Like uh that feels more in line with what the show is supposed to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
Detroiters itself, not it doesn't always hit.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of very reminiscent of like a little bit of like workaholics and a bit of broad city in the
Yes, yes.
in the best friends dynamic, but also has a lot of earlier 2000s touches. Like
Oh,
a very Tom Green ish like stoner kind of Adult Swim kind of vibe to it.
yeah.
It kind of feels to me like a bit of a time capsule of the mid 2010s,
Hmm.
that feels very special to me, like, because that's when I was growing up and everything, and I think like for 2 seasons, the relationship between Tim Kremlin and Sam Duvet is the beating heart of it. Like it's
Yeah.
what makes it so sweet despite it being so aggressive, and welcoming and irreverent and sincere and earnest without being so earnest that it becomes like a Mike Schur show.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's very different from that. And I also, as you said, like the running gag with Maud Crim's Chump of the Week,
Hmm.
in a very short amount of time, um, uh, becomes one of my favorite running gags in any sitcom. and
Yeah.
and Detroiters manages to fill its world with a lot of characters that are silly and endearing, and
Hmm.
as endearing as the two leads. And I think like all great sitcoms, you kind of like hate and love hanging out with these people at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, and or even though in real life it would be quite off-putting.
Yeah.
There are characters like the elderly receptionist Sheila, who shines in every scene with
Yeah.
a lot of quotable and memorable recurring bits. And
Hmm.
like Sheila like dropping a pencil in front of Tim and complaining about her dumb blonde moments. There's Ned, who is this hapless security guard who is
Yeah.
constantly pitching ideas to the guys. And these characters aren't goofy in a vacuum, though. They're goofy because the world they live in is goofy.
Hmm.
The show is kind of smart enough to let Tim and Sam be whatever the scene needs it to be, and this leads to routinely um uh role reversals.
Yeah.
Sometimes one is the straight man and sometimes one is the funny man, and vice versa. When they're dealing with Sheila or Nat, they seem normal, they're straight.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when they deal with their level-headed assistant like Leah, or when they explode, each character can go big or stay grounded, and it allows everyone in the cast to be as gleefully dumb as they are, depending on what the scene or what the joke calls for. you know um it's it's also like a great love letter to the city of Detroit, which not many shows are set in.
Hmm.
I think its finale, it's a real sweet love letter to the city they call home, and a city that isn't very celebrated, shall we say,
Yeah.
in Hollywood TV or cinema. Not in the way that New York or LA is. There are guest spots from Detroit Pistons and uh, professional wrestlers,
Yeah.
and Tuesdays with Maury offer, Mitch Albon, a lot of like local stars, shall we say, that give it like a nice differentiating flavor from a lot of other sitcoms, and
Hmm.
that's kind of the thing about Detroit. It's sentimental and sincere, without, like I said, dipping into Mike Schur territory lah. Like,
Yeah.
because I think like Tim and Sam's obsessions with scatological humor and hot dogs and the latent childishness of like an Adam Sandler film, for example. Like,
Hmm.
it has this like go for broke anything for a laugh energy
Yeah.
that is a bit missing from the smarter, more cynical, more joke layered comedies of modern day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Any last thoughts about Detroiters before we head on to the next Comedy Central show?
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like Detroiters, like you said, is a product of its time. I mean, it wasn't that
Mm-hmm.
long ago, right? Let's like 4 years back, but it
Yeah.
does feel like a much older comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you said. So again, like I think I stayed around because like while the comedy is good, it is this very small moments of sweetness between the characters and in their relationship and just like their general fondness for Detroit that is endearing to kind of like push through whatever unevenness there might necessarily be. Sometimes and yeah, all in all, like it definitely certainly grows on you as you go along. Or at least
Mm.
that was the case for me as I made my way through 2 seasons.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. And as I said, it can be found on Comedy Central. So is this next show called The Other Two, which
Mm,
is a scathing but also at the same time sweet comedy or satire about Gen Z celebrity culture.
yeah.
It's hilarious and heartfelt in its freshman season, which was in 2019. I actually thought it was the best comedy of that year.
Hmm.
It's created by former SNL hit writers Chris Kelly and Sarah Schneider, whose work I followed since
Hmm.
her college humor days back in 2005. And this series begins with the meteoric rise of a 13-year-old who calls himself Chase Dreams. This is a cherubic
Yeah.
Justin Bieber type who becomes an overnight teen pop sensation thanks to his viral music video entitled I Want to Marry You at Recess. And that's when we're introduced to his hapless older siblings, Carrie, played by Drew Tarver, and Brooke, played by Helene York. They are the other two of the title, and they are as befuddled by their little brother's fame as we, the audience, are. To make matters worse, both of them are failed creators themselves. The 29-year-old Carrie is a struggling actor, happy to book commercial spots and rinky-dink plays, while 30-year-old Brooke is a directionless ex-dancer whose only goal for the year is to see 50 dicks. They are hot messes and naturally envious of Chase Dreams' sudden success.
Yeah.
The setup for an acidic satire of resentment and show business is here. But the series isn't cynical, it's so much more. It would have been easy to make Chase an entitled joke while
Hmm.
portraying Carrie and Brooke as bitter millennial slackers who secretly mock the absurdity of Gen Z fame. But and of course they aren't above using their brother's status for their own benefit lah. That concept could have worked in a Curb Your Enthusiasm or an It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia way,
Yeah.
but the other two quickly reveals itself to be more sincere and less cynical than its premise lets on. These siblings actually care for one another, and they're worried about a business that frequently chews up and spits out young stars like Chase. Um, that being said, the show does love to bare its teeth as much as its heart. Like the other two's funniest moments take gleeful pleasure in making fun of everything from vapid red carpet interviews to the ridiculousness of Instagram celebrities.
Hmm.
But these jokes are also carefully positioned to show that perhaps the only reason we enjoy mocking this lifestyle is because we aren't a part of it.
Yeah.
There's a certain envy to it. And while Chase provides the humorous hook, the scripts are actually built around the small milestones and foibles of Carrie and Brooke as they try to make something of themselves, you know.
Hmm.
Like I think sure they suffer delusions of grandeur, right? Like Harry boasts that he went to the theater school where Patrick Wilson's cousin went, and more than a little misguided, you know, when faced with tough choices, they repeatedly show that they're not bad people though. You
Yeah.
know, in fact, their good-hearted support of Chase sometimes leads them to becoming exploited themselves. A particularly witty episode deals with Chase's song about being proud of his gay brother.
Hmm.
And within hours, the meme cycle turns Carrie into an object of ridicule, and then within hours into a gay icon, and then
Hmm.
within hours back into being ridiculed. You know, sort of satirizing the quick news cycle that happens these days in the internet age. You know,
Yeah.
what do you think of the other two in you know the half of the season that you've seen?
Yeah. So I mean, like, I totally understand the entire premise of where they're going with this, right? It is an
Hmm.
easy thing in this day and age, you know, to either follow someone who has become famous via the internet or to hear of someone who becomes famous on the internet, and you take one look at them and you're like, how did they get famous, right? Like what is this special quality that has pushed them from, you know, maybe a streamer behind their computer, sitting in their
Hmm.
room to becoming kind of like adored by millions and getting paid in millions as well.
Hmm.
I don't think that is too far removed from like anybody's kind of like everyday experience in this day and age.
Yep.
Um, to see that being broken down and the story being told from the family's point of view, right? The siblings' point of view, or sometimes in the rare moments of the couple of episodes that I watched from kind of Chase's point of view,
Hmm.
the absurdity of who gets picked and why they get picked is at once illuminating and terrifying at the same time, right? To think that, you know, yeah, basically like there are no real rules as to how this works,
Hmm.
and if you get picked, you get picked, and if you're not prepared, then like be ready for a ride, right? I think you're absolutely right that it could have been very easy for this to go in another direction.
It could have been
uh
mean, right?
yeah, it could have been utterly, you know, um they could have gone a totally mean route. I think there's no better kind of way to kind of put that.
Yep.
You know, where we just deride the phenomenon and the lifestyle and all of that out of a sense of not understanding or jealousy and things like that. But it's
And
just so.
forgetting that the people in the middle are people, right? The
Yes,
people,
yes,
yeah.
exactly that part. I think like what really hit home for me was very early. Probably maybe the first episode. I think the
Yep.
three of them are just like cuddling as siblings on the couch under the blankets or something like that, right? And it's an extremely sweet moment where it, for the first time in that particular episode and the first time in the season, that it dawns on you that these are three completely normal people, normal siblings, right, who have suddenly had, as Shakespeare would have said, had greatness thrust upon the youngest one of them.
Hmm.
Um, and, you know, they're just kind of like trying to figure it out as it goes along. I do like, at least from the episodes I've seen so far, that Chase in particular like doesn't really change. He's still who he is, despite the fact that, you know, he's been launched into like a Bieber like status almost overnight.
Yep.
And he continues to be a very sweet boy.
Hmm.
The other older siblings, however, seem to be more affected by their brother's fame than I expected, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, in the amount of time that I've I've watched and that we spent with this particular family, like it disproportionately affects the older siblings than it does Chase, who I
Yep.
think in many ways was not expecting it and never wanted it, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the two older siblings, with their own like underlying insecurities and delusions of grandeur prior to their brother becoming famous. All of that kind of like boils to the surface, right? And all this slag boils to the surface, and then they have to kind of deal with it that way. It is funny
Mm-hmm.
and extremely like incisive, right, to the kind of celebrity culture that we see in this day and age. I believe the
Yep.
episode you're talking about was actually episode 4. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. The song is "My Brother's Gay" and that's okay. Oh man, the news cycle
Yeah.
thing is like fucking spot on, man. It's so funny. I particularly enjoy the part where they swap from him being from being ridiculed into gay icon. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is like par for the course, right? And it's so accurate in the way that they detail how how that becomes kind of like a thing.
Yeah.
And of course, the inevitable, as always, in the age of the internet, downfall of that particular idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like I think it's a fantastic kind of exploration of how fame or infamy, for that matter, and celebrity culture in this day and age where everything is content and everything gets put online and everyone is just kind of watching,
Mm-hmm.
and how it can affect like totally normal run of the mill people who may or may not have dreams of achieving that kind of fame, right? And then how they deal with that, or how they deal terribly with that when they are not the object of celebration or focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed the half a season that I've gotten so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to hear that season 2 is just as good. But I'll be finishing up season 1 for now. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll get back to you again about like how I feel as things kind of unfold. I feel like there's a lot of space for it to have incredibly dramatic turns if they so wanted to go in that direction, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure at the point where I've watched till.
Mm.
Does that happen?
Yeah, the big overarching mystery about the siblings' relationship with their mother is what happened to their dad,
I see.
and his passing, lah.
Yeah.
Something that his mother doesn't want to talk about, and it provides the dramatic thrust for the end of season 1 and most of season 2, as they deal with that tragedy and what
Mhm.
Chase doesn't understand about it.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, but it
yeah.
never kind of like leaves the kind of realm and tone that they've set up in the first half of season 1.
Not really. I think most of the seasons they start out like the first eight episodes are just like LOLs,
Hmm.
and the last two episodes are really sad,
Yeah.
and grounded, in a way that when all the fame catches up to them, or and stuff like that. Like it enters dramedy territory in its climax, typically in both season 1 and season 2, and in that way,
Oh.
it's quite good as well.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, because I just see like there's a lot of like opportunity and no reason why they wouldn't look into something like that, right? Because as
Hmm.
funny as it is, as great as like the gags are and the satire is, like there is a great deal of like very human emotional elements that can be examined, and I'm glad they're doing some stuff in that direction.
Definitely, similarly, I think like the Other Two season 2 is much like in 2019,
uh,
also the best season of comedy in 2021 as
oh
well.
wow, okay.
It's really good. Perhaps like a minor spoiler for the premise of season 2,
Okay.
where at the end of season 1, Chase, after barely a year of being a star, has enough money, so he retires to go to college,
Hmm.
and so he ends his fame lah, and it's just that like and of course like stars like this are overnight and short lived. They're famous for a while and then they disappear, and that's what kind of happens to Chase.
Yeah.
On the flip side of the other two in season 2, their mother becomes a talk show host and a
Oh
big star,
goodness. Okay.
which kind of flips the script a bit. Not really, because the other two are still the
The
other
other
two
two.
living in the shadow of their mother this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That sounds like it could get very spicy. All right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about the other two before we move on?
Yeah, it's a very easy watch. To say like it's breezy. There isn't like I don't have any sort of like any major hangups about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just these absurd moments that very normal people get into, as opposed to absurd people being put in very normal moments. right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like the difference between like the other two and Detroiters, I guess.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and in that way, I definitely enjoyed what I've seen so far, and I am looking forward to finishing up the rest of season one and moving on to season two.
Yeah, yeah. The other two is quite packed with a lot of hilarity about the artificiality of the media industry.
Hmm.
One of my favorite moments like late in the season is when like Chase is live streaming and he says like shout out to our Lord Jesus Christ and Sony Pictures. Um, there's also a prom that he goes to like late in the season. Sorry to ruin this joke for all
No,
of you and for Isa as well, where the theme is old Hollywood and they are dressed up like the like 40-year-old version,
oh
and stuff like
god,
that. Like because to them that is old
there's old
Hollywood.
Hollywood. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
like like Chase and like Carrie and his sister, right? They really dress up like like 50s movie stars lah, but
Hmm.
everyone else is dressed up like from 2002 comedies, and you got to keep in mind like for these people, like for these kids at that prom, like those films are like 20 years old, so yeah, for them it is old Hollywood.
Yeah.
And but through it all there's this like sweetness and vulnerability too. Every one of these characters that flashes them out beyond a satirical caricature and laughs our mind from the spot on cultural skewering
Hmm.
and the running gags, but its emotional core is what makes you root for them. Absolutely can't miss comedy that critiques the society that we live in,
Yeah.
but also very forgiving of humanity at the end of the day. So yeah, season 1 and 2 is out now. You can catch it on Comedy Central as per usual, or if you're living in the US, it's available on HBO Max on both seasons now.
Awesome.
Uh, Next up, let's move on to one of the older shows that we have. I think it's from 2000, mid 2000s, right? And there were
20. Yeah. Yep. 2009.
2008,
Yeah.
2009.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And like back during that era in the mid 2000s to the early 2010s, there were so many like see shows suddenly cropping up
Hmm.
in the era of what we now call peak TV. And the average viewer, much like today, couldn't have caught them all. It was the era of prestige shows like
Yeah.
Sopranos and Breaking Bad and Battlestar Galactica and The Wire. Um, and yeah, true enough, like those are the shows that you should be prioritizing. But what kind of flew under the radar was a very like extra esque, Ricky Gervais esque comedy on STARZ called
Hmm.
Party Down.
Hmm.
And it still feels a bit like relevant and timeless even to watch it now. It follows the misadventures of some down on their luck Los Angeles caterers, and the catering company, you follow them from one gig to the next. It's a decent concept to start, but the ensemble is what makes the show shine.
Yeah.
Adam Scott plays Henry Pollard, the company's bartender and former actor. Whose single line of dialogue in the beer commercial, "Are we having fun yet?" Tanked his career. Um, but the rest of the guest stars are great as well. He serves as a straight man to Ron Donald, played by Ken Marino, who also can be found in the other two, by the way,
Yeah.
who is the overly enthusiastic team leader. Ron dreams of big time success in the food service industry, but to everyone else on the team, aspiring actors like Casey, played by Lizzie Kaplan, and Kyle, played by Ryan Hansen, and the pseudo intellectual sci-fi nerd writer Roman, played by Martin Starr.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's also like Jane Lynch there.
Yeah.
What the stat cast, and Lydia, played by Megan Mullally. Who moves to LA in order to boost her daughter's acting career.
Yep.
And take Constance's place on the team later on. Like this is nothing but a temporary gig. On the way to stardom.
Yep.
Uh, in addition to the embarrassment of like comedic riches that is the main cast, and you got guest stars like J.K. Simmons, Kristen Bell, and Ken Jeong pop up in supporting roles. And even if the scripts were stale, which they are not, a group like this could make it work. Every episode is penned by one or more of the series co-creators, including Rob Thomas of Veronica Mars fame,
Hmm.
and Paul Rudd also does some writing duties alongside some comedy vets like Fred Savage or Brian Gordon, who are directing the bulk of them. The comedy timing here is all but unparalleled, and the jokes range from pleasantly dry to downright outlandish. And after 2 seasons, Party Down is still to this day an easily bingeable show,
Yeah.
but unlike a series with like constant cliffhangers or heavily serialized storytelling, it can be watched at a leisurely pace as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's a lot of cringe humor that you can get to, but also a lot of smart humor. It's one of the least stressful shows, I guess, in recent memory.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite. In terms of this, like a bit of there's this subgenre right in LA about aspiring actors
Yeah.
or aspiring show business people. And Party Down is like one of the best of them, alongside Ricky Gervais's Extras, which is what this show is clearly inspired by.
Hmm.
What do you
Hmm.
think about Party Down?
Yeah, you're absolutely right when you say that it is a very easy kind of breezy watch, right? It feels low stakes. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of the reason why. Like, there's some of the situations aren't low stakes, but it feels low stakes, right? And the very kind of casual way that they work themselves into this all sorts of shenanigans and situations as they're doing this gig is a joy to just kind of watch, right? I think the cast have a brilliant like kind of chemistry with themselves. I'm a
Yep.
big Lizzie Kaplan fan, and I think like Adam Scott and Lizzie Kaplan in particular, how like Henry and Casey play off of each other is one of the big draws of that. Like the whole tension between the two of them, whether relational or sexual or otherwise, it's something that was a big draw for me to keep coming back to see what exactly happens there. And then like, oh man, Ron's character is just, my god, it is hard to look away, right? It is a train wreck and it is hard to look away. Is the best I can describe it. But just like the very unique situations that they find themselves in episode by episode is kind of mind-boggling sometimes. Like, some of them are hilarious and mundane, and just the fault of this ridiculous cast of characters. Others are just absurd situations that they find themselves in, and ultimately take up the challenge to try and one up. But it's so varied, I think, in that
Hmm.
manner, that it always kind of kept me on my feet, right? Because outside of seeing like the title screen and knowing what the title for the episode is, the contents of that like could really, really kind of go any way, right? Yeah, I think in particular some of the setups in season two were just, oh my god. The opening episode for season two, Jacko Onassis
Mm.
backstage party, I think might be my favorite one. Um, Steve Gutenberg's birthday also is like a super, super funny one. But yeah, like in general, it's fascinating to kind of see and what these characters get up to, and also chart in a very kind of casual way their character growth as we go along. In particular, of
Hmm.
course, Henry and Casey, and to a lesser extent Ron, I guess, since he does disappear for a bit.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I really, really kind of enjoyed it. I felt kind of pretty attached to these characters by the time everything wrapped up in season two.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much to love about Party Down. Particularly if you're into like guest stars playing themselves, including Steve Gutenberg, who plays himself. In that particular era in 2009, it was kind of the rare example of an adult TV comedy, something that we get very regularly now. On
Yeah.
Netflix or HBO or Amazon Prime.
Hmm.
It's a show with like drug use and profanity and nudity, and that was very unusual back in the mid 2000s. And thanks to its home on Stars, which is a premium cable network, Party Down basically had no restrictions on that content,
Mm.
on that type of content, uh, and kudos to them for never pushing that level to grossly gratuitous.
Yeah.
Instead, it uses that freedom to depict the realities of these characters in a raw and truthful fashion. Lah. And also, like I said earlier on, it's one of the best depictions of the modern day struggling artist.
Hmm. Hmm.
The employees of Party Down are not working their dream jobs again. Like for the most part, they are aspiring actors, comedians, and writers looking to pay the bills. There is a diversity to their struggles too.
Yeah.
Henry at the beginning of the series has like given up entirely after one beer commercial, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the heartthrob to be Kyle, who might only need the right role to escape his ABC Family guest star slots, or
Yeah.
the moody Roman who just wants someone to take his hard sci-fi seriously.
Yeah.
And and Constance is perhaps, I think, the most heartbreaking because, despite having spent decades scrambling for tiny supporting roles, she's
Mhm.
refused to give up on finding success as an actor. And it's really ironic that the reason Jane Lynch had to leave the show after like 8 episodes is because she broke out at Glee.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's really weird when you think about it. Like, how many of Party Down's cast got their big break, their characters yearn for?
Yeah.
Like literally everyone in their cast like managed to make it big after the show.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, if this show was airing after the success of their subsequent shows, like say after Parks and Rec or
Yeah.
after Glee or after Lizzie Kaplan became like a movie star or was on Masters of Sex and stuff like that, the show would have been so much bigger. If this was a show filled with a bunch of low key comedic geniuses before they broke big,
Mhm.
and that was very interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's super meta, right? In that way,
Yeah.
for a small time show to kind of like voice them up. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and
For sure.
also with the theme of the show, like with all these people looking to break big at that time,
Hmm.
and only for it to happen because of the show or after the show.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. What were some of your kind of favorite episodes or scenarios for Party Down?
Oh man, it's been so long since I've seen this. Like it's hard to remember, but I remember like Ken Marino constantly being like a laugh out loud machine lah.
Oh yeah.
There is this. Oh man, I haven't seen the show in like 15 years, but there is this one scene where he is trying to, I think, wash a stain off his pants, like in the bathroom, and someone
Yeah,
thinks he's masturbating, right?
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It made me laugh so
At
hard.
a funeral, yeah.
At a funeral,
At a
yes, there. It
funeral.
made it made me laugh so hard. Yeah, I love Ken Marino. Like he's great in the other two as well.
Yeah, I mean when he popped up in because I would definitely watch Party Down before I watched the other two. When he popped up at the dinner table, I was just oh my god, here we go.
Hmm.
I was so excited just because like having seen like Party Down in recent memory. His performances are really kind of great.
Yeah.
In particular, like going from new Ron to like depressed Ron to new Ron
Hmm.
was like one of the kind of running gags of the show that was very heartfelt despite the fact that it was played up for so much laughs. Um,
Hmm.
and just like generally very, very good. I wish, honestly, Party Down could have continued.
Yep.
I do feel like there could have been more that they could have done from there. I wasn't quite ready for their story to end necessarily.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, yeah. I'm glad the cast have gone on to do great and wonderful things in comedy and have found success, much like their counterparts in the show have been
Yeah.
desiring. Hmm.
Yeah. In fact, I think like only Martin's star because of Freaks and Geeks was already big at the time, but I think because of Silicon Valley, he became even bigger after
Yeah.
this
Hmm. Hmm.
show. Like I said, like this show wouldn't have come about if Veronica Mars wasn't cancelled, because the entire creative team and a lot of the cast were on Veronica Mars,
Hmm.
especially Ryan Hansen, who was the star, and Ken Marino was the star on Veronica Mars as well.
Yeah.
Um, this was great, and sadly, like Veronica Mars, it also got cancelled because it didn't find its audience.
Yeah.
But thanks to DVD box sets in the past 10 years, and now that it's on streaming services here and there,
Hmm.
it's become a bit of a cult classic that has gained an audience beyond its time. Yeah, it's great. You should really, really go check this out if you haven't. It hasn't dated at all. I think
Yeah.
Party Down could easily be rebooted in 2021 with a whole new cast of struggling actors.
Mm. I think
Yeah.
outside of the fact that they're using kind of flip phones, right? Like nothing really gives it away.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, and like it's rebooting it. That would be fascinating. Like as in keep the premise and have a whole slate of new characters.
New struggling like characters lah, and like a great idea for the first episode probably would be for them to be catering the house of one of the original caterers who has made it big.
Oh yeah, I would totally watch that. I would totally watch it. I
Yeah.
think like enough time has elapsed since this is 2009. It's been like a decade. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I would love to do that. And I think the struggle would definitely be a little different, right?
Hmm.
Now kind of with everything available and the fact that like social media is a massive thing that they had to deal with in the show.
Yeah.
So having all of that would be fascinating to kind of watch, right? Because like being being a struggling, actor slash artist kind of deal, right? Is hard enough already without social media. I would totally like to see how that happens. Uh, um, yeah, because it's so much more difficult when you have to be seen all the time in order to make it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that was our thoughts on Party Down, and we'll be moving on to the final show that we'll be talking about this week. It is HBO Mexico's or HBO Latin America's Los Espookys, which at the time when it aired in 2018 or 2019, I thought was just great. Like I remember covering it a bit in a quick hits for genre equality.
Hmm.
I fell in love with the lo-fi surreality of the Spanish language horror comedy.
Yeah.
It was created by Fred Armisen, and it is a weird show set in a fictional Latin American city, and follows a group of millennial Latinx goth weirdos
Yeah.
who embrace their passion for the macabre and decide to make a business out of scares. It's sort of a reverse Scooby Doo, where you root for the people setting up the haunts
Hmm.
instead of the ones solving the mysteries.
Hmm.
And these oddballs follow their endeavor from one absurd scenario to the next, leading to some of the most unconventional humor you'll find on TV. For example, the pilot focuses on an old priest jealous of a quote unquote young hot priest,
Yeah.
and wants to stage an exorcism to prove that he's cooler.
Hmm.
Or there's an eccentric billionaire who dies and leaves this in his will. He wants to invite five strangers to stay one night in this quote unquote haunted mansion,
Yeah.
and the last person standing wins the fortune. Apparently it's routine in their line of work because it's called a quote unquote standard inheritance scare. Uh, there's a local town in need of a tourist, need of tourist dollars, tourist
Yeah.
commerce,
Yeah.
hires them to hoax an invasion of a tentacled sea creature. Like you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but underneath all the latex and fake blood and bizarre antics, Lost of Spookies has a ton of heart, and the series is really about embracing who you really are and following your dreams. Each of its characters face their own rocky path to self-acceptance,
Yeah.
which is always extremely silly but somehow still relatable.
Hmm.
It's an off-kilter show that is wonderfully weird and dryly absurd, and enduringly bizarre. The jobs that they get form the crux of their laughs, and the comedic ensemble is so talented and well matched.
Yeah.
Like the scares may be fake, but the world it's set in has a degree of magical realism where there are some truly magical happenings going on,
Hmm.
other than the gang's low budget productions. It really embraces this surreal alt universe, building a this rich world where surface level concept evolves into something stranger. It blurs the line between fantasy and reality. You know, yeah, it's great. I love the mundanity. I love the reality of it. I love the unconventional humor,
Yeah.
including the weird girl whose job is literally to turn the clock in a town square,
Oh my
like
god.
manually.
Yeah.
Or she literally like turns a fan manually. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, and there is a ghost or a poltergeist. I'm not sure what it was. I forgot at the time, but a ghost who really just wants to watch the King's Speech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It was
it's
it was
yeah.
the it was the sea spirit, the ocean
Yeah,
spirit.
the
Yeah.
the mermaid demon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was that scene was so strange. It was so weird. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the girl, Tati, yes, yeah, she is like easily like the highlight of the show. Like everything she does is so bizarre, and she's like
Hmm.
so dim-wittedly blank
Yeah.
and invulnerable to pain, right? And
Yeah.
her manual jobs of turning blades of a fan, or manually moving the hands of a clock is so ridiculous. And then she gets taken in by a Herbalife pyramid scheme.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
ends up
yeah, it's
consuming everything.
it's fantastic. What do you think about Lost and Spookies?
Oh man. This is so left field. My
Mm.
God. It took me a while to kind of get into it. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to follow. I do think the pilot in particular was a really kind of like good setup for that. You kind of got the gist of what was going on. Um but yeah, like it did take me a while. Maybe partly because of the language kind of barrier. And because a lot of the on-screen stuff, you could get distracted by the subtitles.
Yep.
And because it's a lot of it is kind of blink and you miss it, right? Especially like the magical realism stuff, that is on screen, kind of in the background. It's not super obvious necessarily. You do have to pay attention if you want to catch it. Um, but yeah, I love Fred Armisen here as Tico. I think like for me, outside of Tati, I can't remember the actress's name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Fred Armisen's Tico is my favorite from the show, just because like I don't know, man. There's something about Fred Armisen's like straight face with that mustache. Oh man, that in and of itself like is pure gold.
Yeah.
From there, but like the really kind of like the group's low budget horror antics, and at the same time the show's very obviously low budget nod,
Mm-hmm.
right, to certain things, just plays up the hilarity um so much that I really wasn't expecting that. Like a lot of the time I'm just like, oh my god, that is so bad, but it's so bad that it's good. In particular, that scene that we're talking about, with the spirit who only wants someone to help them watch the King's Speech.
Yeah.
Wow, it is overlong, it is painful, it is
Mm-hmm.
very clearly very cheaply done, but it's
Yeah.
funny as hell. Right? It's
Yeah.
so uncomfortable, but I fucking loved it at the end of it.
And I love that the mermaid demon parasite was as underwhelmed with the King's Speech as everyone was after
Yeah.
it won the Oscar, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So why did I sit through the beginning like that? But
Yeah.
it really made sense. Yeah, Tati's kind of like little. She doesn't get a ton of screen time necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I love how the main cast always hand wave away the strangeness of the things that she's doing. Right.
Yeah.
As I think the one that I found the funniest was when she's moving like the second hand clock.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh yeah, she can't do anything else, so she's just gonna do like the second hand clock,
Mm-hmm.
manually. And I'm just like, what the hell? And
Yeah.
they
And
constantly just dismiss it, right? With
yeah.
a reason that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and then carry on, whatever conversation they have for a really long time while she continues to do it in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's so silly. It's so good. And so like kind of off the cuff. There's always something there to kind of catch you off guard. And you aren't sure. Like, okay, for me personally, there were moments in time if I wasn't sure if something was funny or not, right? Like it
Yeah.
gets delivered and it only hits you later. It's kind of like a delayed response.
Mm-hmm.
Like how good the setup actually has to be in order for you to be caught off guard and then find it funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like a joke that sets in too late.
Yeah.
But Lost as Spookies is filled with a ton of that, and I don't know how they delivered that so continually and consistently throughout the entire season. I mean, given that
Yeah.
it's only 6 episodes, but like I think it's quite a feat to be able to consistently do that, where you catch your audience off guard with a
Mm-hmm.
combination of things, and then they realize that that what they saw was actually extremely funny.
Yes. Lots of Spookies has what I call the buffering effect in comedy.
Yep,
Specifically when you watch Tina Fey comedies where her jokes are so bizarre and unconventional that
yep,
you have a hard time wrapping your head around it. And by that time, six other unconventional jokes have flown by, and you have to, yeah, and you're still thinking of the first one, and you have to rewind to catch joke number two, three, and four, and five.
yeah,
The jokes are so fast paced and tinged with absurdity, and at its best, Lost as Bookies feels like a half-hour telenovela that's
hmm,
assembled by the 30 Rock writers room or the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt writer room. Well, they're the same writers room,
yeah,
and the running jokes are great. Like Andres's parents are always pressuring him to marry his boyfriend Juan Carlos,
yeah,
but we're never allowed to see their faces.
hmm,
Ronaldo's like haunting pain of the lack of Y in his name is probably the most hilariously absurd.
yeah,
He's doomed to explain the unusual spelling to every client. Everyone is always like Reynaldo, no Ronaldo. Are you sure? You know, the Mira Esto host, Gregoria,
yeah, yeah,
every time like she removes her pink stilettos and her feet remain in this like high heeled arc of a Barbie doll, it's also very funny. And when they're not crafting like bespoke spooks for paying customers,
hmm,
the Lost at Spookies gang also kind of grapple with relatable challenges, like making rent and
yeah,
coping with family strife or meeting online dates whose profile pictures definitely do not match reality.
Hmm.
Um, do like these worldly concerns sometimes cause friction within the group, and Ronaldo and his compadres always find their way back together. Like, for all its fantasy or foolishness, Los Spookies is at its heart a comedy about like friendship and following your passions and
Hmm.
fighting the urge to fit in.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts about Lost Spookies?
Oh man, yeah. I would anybody who is attempting Lost as Spookies, right? Stick with it. Right. I think this is one of those shows that you will be duly rewarded if you stick with it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Very sad that there is no season two as of yet. It has not been cancelled as I know of,
Hmm.
but well, because of COVID last year, they had to stop filming.
I see.
It's partly why the second season of the other two was delayed for 2 years as well because of COVID. But it finally came out this year. Hopefully next year or early next year we'll get a new Lost as Spookies. Because HBO has a lot of faith in the show, and apparently it gets good ratings in Mexico where it should.
Oh, that awesome.
So yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Fred Emerson is probably like the most recognizable name in the show,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
he doesn't steal it away from the stars of the show.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. I mean like his comedic timing is just amazing. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he constantly does it, but definitely catch Lost as Spookies.
Yeah.
I think this was the surprise of the lot for me, right?
Yeah.
Especially reading kind of the before diving into these four
Mm-hmm.
shows, right? Lost as Spookies didn't quite catch me at the beginning of that, but yeah, at the end of it, it was really really fun.
Definitely, man. Yeah. Maybe next year I'll come back with another version of like obscure comedies that I love, but no one else has ever seen because there's a lot of them, particularly with Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which is so funny that I'm shocked that nobody ever like talks more about it or it doesn't get like
I
awards, and stuff
started
like that.
on that earlier this year, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still kind of making my true because this is fair amount of stuff to go
Yeah.
through. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It was something that constantly popped up under my recommendations for
Mm-hmm.
comedy on my Netflix. But I just never kind of picked it up. Never kind of like bothered to check it out. But yeah, I'm slowly making my way through that. Yeah, I agree.
Like
Definitely underrated.
one once you're done with Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, you should go on to its Choose Your Own Adventure movie on
Oh
Netflix.
shit!
Uh,
They have a choose your own adventure movie. Okay.
which I feel like it's tougher to do than what Black Mirror did,
Uh huh.
because like it offers like sometimes three or four choices, and each particular narrative road or your choice
Yep.
leads to like insane like variations of jokes. I can't imagine like the work in the writers room coming up with variations of the same joke for different times or different plots.
Shit, that
Dep-
sounds
depending on where you can go. Yeah, it's
complex as
crazy, and
fuck.
all the jokes are good. Like you
Hmm.
want to go through every scenario, because Black Mirror's Bandersnatch, right? Like
Yep.
not every plot line was good, but
Hmm.
every joke in the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt alternate plot lines are worth it. Like you just want to play through everything just to catch like every single punchline.
That's insane.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. I'm just reading the description here. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but it's better for me to get to that after I'm done with the season.
After you're
Uh.
done with the show, yeah, definitely, because it carries on from the show.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely, and it's one of those where like John Hamm, first started, showing his comedy chops.
Hmm.
John Hamm is like starring in a lot of comedies now. He was in Curb Your Enthusiasm last season, and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt was where he got his start. Like he plays the cult leader that imprisons Kimmy
Yeah.
in the beginning, and he's amazing. Yeah, I mean, since you've already started Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, like maybe in a few months from now we'll get back to that, and I'll pick some other like some obscure comedies on streaming services that nobody else has seen.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's great, man. And we'll be back next in 2 weeks. Sorry, for Netflix nonfiction. Well,
Hmm.
I'll be talking about some of the smarter, more informative, more incisive, and more insightful documentaries that are available on Netflix. In a bit of a rebellion against the popular documentaries that seem to be viral, the sensationalistic or exploitative or dishonest stuff like Tiger King. or Seaspiracy, and things like that. Lah. So yeah,
Yeah.
tune in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that, and we'll be back for genre equality, of course.
Mhm.
In due time, where we'll give our thoughts on the Eternals,
Mhm.
the new Cowboy Bebop, which is coming out soon,
Mhm. Mhm.
and has a lot of great genre stuff that I caught from various festivals over the past month. So yeah, tune in for that. We got lots to hit up, and of course in December we'll talk about the best of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
got to get to making my list.
yeah.
Uh,
Can't wait for that, man. Any final thoughts before we sign off here?
oh no, 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 that's about it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of switching gears from like the
Mhm.
comedy to the nonfiction stuff. It's
Yep.
gonna be quite a. It might be a bit of whiplash for me, but we'll see how that goes.
Definitely, definitely, because like the nonfiction is so much more hard hitting, right?
Yeah,
It's so,
yeah.
yeah, and it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about that. Till next time, this has been Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.